Hey guys, so in this one we're going to apply damage, then we're going to calculate damage reduction based on armor, and we're also going to create some floating damage indicators so we know how much damage we applied. First thing, we're going to be using built-in functions from Unreal for applying damage, and there is few different ones. So if you search for apply damage, you do have regular apply damage, apply point damage, and apply radial damage. I will be using point damage because it has a little bit more info. So it has this hit from direction and also hit info, and that will be useful when we're calculating like angle for blocking or spawning some sounds at location. And this is how you apply damage, but when you're receiving damage, you need to call event point damage. And anything that you actually apply here, so anything that you pass on here, you can get in this event from point damage. So we also want to create function that will calculate the damage reduction and everything else, but since we don't want to create it just for player but also for enemy, we need to create it in combat component. One problem is that combat component can't actually access this event point damage because this is only for actors. So here if you do event point damage, it will come empty. So we need to create custom function here that will pass on some of the information from there. So let's create new function, and this will be called take damage. It will need few inputs. So if we look at this event point damage, we will need damage definitely. Later on we'll be using damage types. We can use hit location, and from these ones we only need damage causer, which is the actor that actually caused damage. So in the combat component, at first one, as I said, this will be damage float. Second one will be damage type, which is damage type object reference. Third one will be hit location, and that is vector. And the last one will be damage causer, which is actor. Careful, don't do AR actor, but just actor object reference. Now we do have function setup. You can compile, and back in a player, instead of doing just this, we're also going to get combat components and take damage. Connect everything here: damage, damage type, hit location, and damage causer. We might be using some more later, but for now this is enough. And now the combat component can process it. We can also copy this part to enemy. And in enemy you can just paste it somewhere in the event graph. So now both of the enemy and player will be using this take damage function. And now we're still not applying damage in the first place. So let's go to combat component, event graph. And we do have this line trace. So if the actor is valid, we're only checking for actor that has trace channel enemy. So we can remove this print string, and on true we're going to apply damage. Sorry, apply point damage, because that is the one I want to use. And then for damage actor, it needs to be the actor that we actually hit. So from here, do hit actor, base damage. We will have damage in stats component. We already have it in player. I'm not sure if we set it up in the enemy, but what we need to do is get owner, which is player or enemy, get component by class, just a single component, not components, and then this will be stats component. So stats component, and we need to get max stat, which is where we have armor, damage, and all this stuff stored. Search for damage, and that is the value we're passing to damage. So if the player has 20 damage from main hand and off hand, it will be base damage will be 20. Hit direction, we can do impact point. Hit info is this whole info. So from out hit, we just connect hit info. Event instigator is the controller of the player, but we We don't really need this because we are using it for player and enemy. It can be also enemy AI, but we just leave it empty for now. Damage causer is the actor that caused this damage. So all we have to do is get owner. So that will be owner of this component. Again, it's enemy or the player. And damage type class we will leave empty for now. We'll do different damage types probably in the next video. So with this setup, let's go to take damage. And here, the easiest setup would be just again to get owner, get component by class, component, and stats component. And then we will modify this time. So modify current stat, because we're going to modify health. And we just need the value that we'll modify it by, which is damage. But damage is in a positive value, so what we need to do is multiply this by -1. So if damage we are causing is 20, we will modify current stat health by -20. Alright, so this is very simple setup. If we compile and save, and then just play the game, we should be able to hit this actor, and the combat component will handle the rest. So there we go. I'm causing some damage, so my damage on this is 20. I do have 20 damage here, so I'm basically causing 20 points of damage. I'm also going to turn off now the line trace debug. So first of all, I'll remove this one, and here in a draw debug type, it will be none. Compile and save. And now we're taking damage. We also want to calculate the damage reduction from armor, because we don't want to be taking the full amount of damage. So in take damage, we're going to use some armor formula. You can even find online. I just modified it slightly. And the formula will be, so we actually need to get this stats component. So first get max stat, because we need armor, and that is where it is stored in the max. So armor, and now we need to add to this armor, and the value you should add to armor should be like maybe the maximum amount of armor you can have from all items included, plus some buffs and everything. That's how you kind of calculate it. I realize that value of 500 is probably what is good amount, because then we're going to divide our armor with this value, and it will give us value between 0 to 1. So let's say if armor, we only have 100 armor, we divide 100 by 600, which I think is around, I don't know, 0.1 something. So let's say it's 0.15. which would be a 15% reduction in damage. Okay? And or if you have armor of 1000 and you divide 100 by 1000, you would have a 50% damage reduction. So you can adjust this value as you wish. If you have a higher armor in game, then you should probably go higher here. If you do 1000, it will be less damage reduction. But I think the maximum at the moment I can equip, even with the shield, is around 500. So I'll leave it at 500, and then this is the damage reduction, but if we have multiplied this by damage, it would give us wrong value, because we need to first do subtract, and we need to do first, this will be right click and do float. And we need to do 1 minus this, because as I said, if this is 0.2, then we need to have only 20% reduction, and if you multiply this by damage, this would give you 80% reduction. So first we do 1 minus, which is 0.2, that will give us 0.8, and if we multiply this damage now by 0.8, that will be basically 80% of this damage, because we have reduced it by 20 from armor, and that is the value we need to connect. And since we're not doing 1 minus, we also need to do 1 minus here actually after. Okay, so -1. And now, if I want to test it out, I'm going to connect print string. And I'll connect this value so we can see how much it's being reduced by. And on enemy, stats component, armor, we have 0, but I'm going to set it just on this specific enemy, not by default. And I'm going to go to stats component and change its armor to maybe 200. Sorry, it doesn't need to be in current stat. It can't be in current stat. It can only be in max stat. So 200 armor on this enemy. And now if I equip maybe this axe, do I have offhand here? Axe and offhand, I do have 16 damage. Let's attack, and you can see in the top left corner I got -11. So out of 16 damage I reduced it by maybe 4.5 damage. So that's what 200 armor does. If you wanted really strong armored enemy, you would increase the max stat of armor to maybe like 1000. And now this is probably going to be easier to calculate if I have 200 with 20 damage. Now this guy, I'm only causing 6.6 damage. So almost nothing. He reduced it by 14 by having 1000 armor. So, which is about maybe 60-70%. But then more you go, higher you go, it reduces less and less. That's kind of how it is made in games. This specific formula, I think, is from Warframe. But, as I said, you can also adjust this value. So higher you go, less reduction you will have. And the lower this value is, the more reduction you will actually calculate. I'll remove this print string. One thing we also want to do, I don't want to do 6.6 damage, I want to round it up. So we're going to round to integer. Is it round? Yeah, just the regular round and connect it here. So if it was 6.6, it will be 7 and so on. Compile and save. And yeah, this is how you reduce damage by armor. And we will be doing something similar for different damage types. So we will be reducing damage by resistance. And for now, what I want to do is also set up damage indicators. So we will have a little floating numbers that will show you how much damage was caused. Kind of like maybe Borderlands style, something similar. And for that, we need to create a couple of new widgets. So right click, user interface, and this will be widget blueprint, user widget. And first one, we need to create the placeholder. So I'm going to call it DMG damage indicator placeholder underscore widget. And then I'm also going to create one more. So user interface, widget blueprint, and user widget. And this one will be DMG, so damage indicator underscore widget. So for damage indicator placeholder, what we want to do here is just add canvas panel. And in this canvas panel, we need to add some box that will be adding all those damage indicators too. So for that, I'm not going to do border because border can only have one child and we might need to spawn multiple ones in the same one. So let's do overlay, add it to canvas panel, and also anchor it to middle. So hold Control and Shift and click, and let's make it bigger, because if you leave it really small, we can't randomize the location, and we want to do that. So on this one, I'm going to change it to like 300, 300. And this will be the space that we can actually move or spawn those damage indicator numbers. So compile and save. Now, we also need to add a combat interface to this widget. So we can call it and tell it to spawn the damage. So in the class settings, go to add, implemented interfaces, and search for combat, BPI. And in the combat BPI, blueprint interface, combat BPI, we're going to create a new function. I'm going to change the category to combat, and this function will be spawn damage indicator. We need to have an input, which will be float, and it will be called damage. So how much damage we actually need to display. For now, we're not going to do like a color or different damage types. I'm just going to leave it. We can just add it easily after. So compile and save. And now in the damage indicator placeholder, we're going to... why did I create it wrong? Did I not compile it? Compile and save. What have I done? Inputs, damage indicator placeholder. Okay, just compile is needed. And now when we call this, so double click on it, we're going to actually spawn indicator. And here what we need to do is spawn widget from class. Create widget. See, it was a long time since we did the widgets, so I forgot. It's create widget, and this will be the second widget we created, which is damage indicator. And then we will need to go back to designer. We want to add it to this box as a child. So this overlay, I'm going to name it placeholder, check is variable, go back to graph, get it, and then add child. So this damage will be added as a child. Okay. We also want to pass damage to that damage indicator. So we need to go to damage indicator. I haven't opened it. So back in a widget, damage indicator. Here I will also quickly add canvas panel. And then we also want to add text to this canvas panel. This one will be in the middle, so Control and Shift and click. Size is fine, and we'll do justification to center. You can change the color. Just keep in mind that what I want to do different damage types like fire, maybe lightning, poison and stuff. So like red color might be taken, I don't know what, maybe yellow won't be used for anything, lightning can be blue. So you can change the color if you like. I'm just going to leave it kind of white, just slightly a bit, I don't know, towards red. And this will basically say how much damage, so something like 50. This is just as an example, but we need to make this also a variable, so this will be damage DMG text. Check is variable. And now back in a placeholder, one more thing, sorry. Go back to graph in damage indicator, create new variable, and this one will be damage float. And we need to make it instance editable and expose on spawn. Compile and save, back in a placeholder. Now if you right click and refresh, we made this exposed on spawn, so we just connect the damage. So as soon as we create it, it will have this damage variable filled up. And to actually add this damage indicator to enemy, we don't need it on the player because we don't want to be showing how much damage we're taking straight away. We do have a health bar for that. So it's only for the enemy. Go to enemy. We're going to add here to components. It will be widget. And this widget will be called DMG indicator. And here we just need to change this space to screen. Widget class is the placeholder. So damage indicator placeholder. And I don't think we need to change anything here. We can just position it. So in a viewport, I want to have it maybe on the right side or left side, doesn't matter, just somewhere, not directly like in the middle. So maybe I'll offset it like that. Just keep in mind there is also that box that we have, so it won't be exactly where you put it here. It will be somewhere higher, but we can position it later. So now we should be able to actually test it out, but first we need to actually call it. So in event graph, because at the moment this damage indicator is empty because this placeholder doesn't show anything, it's empty. So when we take the damage, we need to get damage indicator, we need to get its widget, because this is just a component, so get widget, so we do have a reference. And now we can call that function that we set up in Combat BPI, because we do have reference. So we will call spawn damage indicator message, connect it here. For damage, we don't have a damage after calculation, so we don't want to display this one, because this one is a base damage, not the final damage. So in a take damage, double click to open it up, and what we want to do is click on this one. We just need to add output, return note, and here we need to do float, and this will be final damage, because this will be the one after calculation. And just connect it here in the end and pass on this same value. Compile and save. Now back in enemy, we can just pass this final damage. So as soon as we receive damage, we will take the damage, reduce it by that amount of armor, and then we will spawn damage indicator. And then in the damage indicator placeholder, we will basically call this, create a damage indicator, add child, and show it. And here in the damage indicator, what we need to do is on pre-construct, we need to get this damage text, set text, we can do the function, and the text will be the damage. So how much damage we're taking, and this should be enough to actually just test it out. It will be stationary for now, but it should work. So let's equip some weapon and damage, and you can see, okay, this shouldn't be -7. Okay, we need to pass a different value, because we don't want to see -7, we want to see how much damage actually we cost. So either we can multiply this again by -1, or we can pass. Alright, we're doing it here. So yeah, let's just multiply it by -1 instead of changing that function, which minus times minus is plus again. So it will give us correct indicator. So now when I apply damage, you can see that indicator, it's still kind of on the wrong side, so I'll have to move it a little bit to the right. But what we want to do now is make it fade out and also float up, and then maybe left or right in the random direction. So in the damage indicator itself, we need to set up 4 variables now. So on pre-construct, we can create new variable. This one will be location or current X, which will be location X, then will be current Y, and then we need target, so where it will actually go. That will be target X and target Y. Now we will set current X and set current Y. We don't need to spawn it on the exactly same spot. We can randomize it a little bit, just slightly, so it's not like all over the place, all over that box that we created in placeholder. But we can do random float in range, and we can do 0 and 20 maybe, and same thing here, 0 and 20, so it will be offset by 20 centimeters. And then set the current location, and then we need to actually set the location of this damage indicator itself within that box. What we need to do is get damage text. We need to do slot to canvas. What is it? Canvas slot as canvas slot. It will convert it, and then we can set location. Set location, is it? Okay, sorry, so it's me being dumb, it's set position. I don't know why I didn't think of this. So set position. And set position, we will right click, split struct pin, and connect X and Y. So that will be the starting position of this damage indicator, but it's kind of within confines of this placeholder, this box here, okay, because we're adding child to this one. And now we have slightly randomized starting position. We also want to move this indicator up, so we need a target location. So we're going to set target X, set target Y, and for set target X, we're going to get again random floating range. So this will be if it will go up and left or up and right. So we can maybe do like -50 on X. So this will be the horizontal axis, and +50. And then Y, we only want to go up. So we need to get random floating range, and we need to get minus value first. So it will be -75 to maybe -100. So it will go up by 75 centimeters up to 100 centimeters, randomized again. Compile and save. And now we need to actually move it. So this will have to be done on tick. We will set position. Again, we need to actually get this part as well, damage text and slot as canvas slot. And we need to do interp 2, which is F interp 2. We need to get it twice for X and Y. So this will basically move from current location to target location based on a delta time, which we have here as a delta time. And interp speed is how fast it will go. I'll leave it something like 2. And then current location, we do have current X. We do have current Y. And we also generated target X. So where we need to go, and target Y. But this finterp2 won't do anything if you don't save the new location of current X, otherwise it will always go between this one and this one, but just one tick and it will reset. So we need to also save it. So set current X and set current Y from here. So this one is X, this one is Y, and then we can also connect it to position X, position Y. Compile and save. And now we can test it out. So if I now attack this guy here, again it's very slow, my game, this computer is old, but you can see I do have a floating damage indicators. Okay, so they're floating up to different directions, but as you can see they're not disappearing. So what we want to do, we want to also make them disappear. We want to fade them out. So back in damage indicator, let's go to designer. We need to go to animations down here. I'm going to dock it in layout. Let's create animation which will be fade. And select it. We need to also have this damage text selected. Add damage text. And here if you click on this plus, we should have fade something. Flow direction, render opacity, sorry, it's nothing to do with fade. So render opacity. And now we're just going to make this longer. I want this indicator to live for about maybe 1.5 seconds. So render opacity on the first frame will be 1. You can just key it in if it's not already, and then on 1 second it will start fading out. So here we need to key in the 1 render opacity, and then when we go to 150 we're going to change it to 0 and key it in again. Alright, so now basically, I don't know if you can see it very well, it will play this animation. It will pop in straight away and then slowly disappears. So in the graph, we can do that on construct because this is pre-construct. So on construct, we're going to play, get this animation fade first, drag from it, and then play animation. And you don't have to change anything here, but when this animation is finished, so after 1.5 seconds, we want to destroy this damage indicator, so destroy self. So we're going to get event animation finished. So animation finished fade. This will track it for us. So after it's finished, we're going to remove from parent, and the target is self. So now when you compile and save, play the game, and now equip this. Let's attack this guy. There we go, 7, 7, and you got floating damage indicators, as you can see. Okay. And now when we have a multiple damage types, it will basically spawn on a slightly bit different location, go at different speed up, because it's always randomized, so we can actually see all of them. One more issue that you can probably see is sometimes it is in front of the health bar and sometimes it's behind it. That is because it's screen location, so it's kind of whatever is in the front. So we could just move it slightly bit to the front, but then when you were looking up, it would still be the health bar that would be in the front, so you wouldn't see those numbers. But if you want to move it to the front, there is slightly silly workaround. I think it has something to do with C++ and how it actually loops through those widgets. If we go to enemy blueprint, damage indicator, and here search for layer, all we have to do is on this shared layer name, we'll put 1 behind it. And as I said, it's a silly solution, but that will make the indicator be always in the front of the health bar. So now, let's go closer. You can see no matter which direction I turn, you can see those damage numbers always in the front. Alright, so that is all for this video, and I'll see you in the next one, where we will probably do different damage types.